Well, I don't know where his power cord is, but we've got.
Do you know who that gentleman is? Oh.
Reporting on a Coast Guard boat. I had a fight in here. And everybody ran to the quarterdeck and said, "Who in the world is this?" They said, "Where are you from, son?" He said,
Oh my God.
"Where are you from?"
I mean,
You kind of learned to pronounce certain words where everybody could understand them, you know.
It's American.
Okay, so go to the next one and see if we can, we don't need that one, but the next one, see if we can play that on the.
A lot of people look and they say, "What? Are you? Is that Irish, English accent?
Rick.
Where are you guys from? You're like Australia or what?" You know, what's from the United States?
They didn't think one of them was American. I said, "Yeah." So they go, say you talk funny. Say you don't talk like we do. Well, they didn't talk like I did either.
Okay, we'll go to the next one. Next slide. Okay, so we have lots of old people, distinguished people. This is a person who died not too long after we got there, but she was certainly sort of a matriarch of the village, and Candy can talk to this more later, but we'll go to the next one here. Okay, so what's happened for 31 years of study? Well, first of all, we have all of these archived. They will be there forever on a website. Anybody who wants them, while it's a protected website, we can give you permission to get onto the Ocracoke and get any person you want. We also have stories of the recent flood that we're collecting in a new collection. So that's one of the things. We've also been writing several books, and actually the book that we have written now with Candy, the local who sort of checks everything that we say so that we don't distort too much truth. Actually, have turned out to be something very different in linguistics, because linguists tend to write very, very technical works that nobody reads and few people understand. Okay, we've done more than 50 research articles. As a matter of fact, every student who studies social linguistics in the United States now knows who Rex O'Neill is, because we talk about him so much. And he's become sort of an icon of the guy who can perform the dialect, on command. So that's one of the interesting things. Okay, let's push the next one here. We have 2 documentaries. We have 2 oral histories. Actually, both of the oral histories are embedded in the book. So if you want to hear them, they're now a part of the book, the full histories. We did them in CD, but nobody uses CDs anymore. So they are in the book. Okay, so we've also taught 30 years consecutively. We missed 1 year during COVID, but the next year, the kids who were in 8th grade, we teach it to 8th graders, they felt so left out that they forced us to teach it to the 9th graders and the 8th graders the next year. So it's consecutive. It's consecutive in terms of teaching, and it's quite popular and so forth. And there are people now in their 50s who I had when they were in 8th grade. Okay, next thing here. Okay, and then we've also done a lot with the Ocracoke Preservation Society. We have a small exhibit in there about the language, which is interesting because back in 1995, I had students. We set up a small sort of a documentary that 2 students did with me. They were in my class and they said they didn't like syntax. I said, "What do you want to do?" She said, "We want to do videos." I said, "Okay, you can do a video." So I set up an independent study. They came to Ocracoke. It cost about $1,000 to hire a plane for aerial shots and so forth. We didn't have technology then that they have now. And it's been running there now since 1995. And we've tried to sort of change it out, but people sort of like the stories and they like the tenor, and even though it's not technically the best thing we've done. Okay, so that's another thing. And then one of the things is it's got not widespread news coverage from BBC, NPR, CBS, CNN, WRAL. So that one of the things that the public world has done is they've learned to celebrate and come and talk about it, which is certainly another way of preserving it. Okay, so we'll go to the next one there. This is how long we've been here. This is James Barry when he had his last kid. Okay, so that's Candy's brother. All right. We also filmed him when he was a teenager with his dad fishing. And just recently, he graduated from NC State. Interestingly enough, he started out as a marine science major, but the professors were too dumb. And so he switched to history. He didn't like the way that they viewed sort of the beach, the water around the beach and so forth, and said, I'm a major in something I can learn something. Is that sort of kind of accurate?
Pretty much. He knew more than they knew about the water and
Well,
growing up
about
on it.
fishing, he certainly did.
Yeah. And so
Way
this is,
more.
so this sort of shows, so here we have three generations, and it's kind of a sweet story. And also, Morty is one of the few full-time fishers now, so he still fishes. He doesn't do anything else, does he?
He's had his commercial fishing license since he was 16.
Okay, and he still fishes. So there are only how many people do that now?
There might be about a dozen and a half. There's not a whole lot that do that now.
Okay, so that's kind of that gives you sort of a longitudinal view. Okay, we'll go to the next one there. Okay, so here we have sort of sometimes no, we stay here. Yeah, confusion. There should be a click down there to do the video. This is
Okay.
actually, yeah. Look down at the bottom of it. There you go. See if we can get it on that. Okay, go clear it and see if you can get it in the smaller. Because before you could get it.
There it comes.
Can you just escape and make it, and then play it from that? Oh. Okay, now try that. There you go.
I was in college. We had a tea go to for the president. I wanted to iron the dress to get the crease out of it where it had been taped up, and I went there.
I'm sorry. I cut her off.
I was in college. We had a tea go to for the president. I wanted to iron the dress to get the crease out of it where it had been taped up, and I went to every suite in that dorm, asking if they had an iron I could borrow. Nobody had an iron. Nobody had an iron. Come find out, everybody had one. They didn't know what I was asking for. They all had irons, but I needed an iron.
There are these sorts of confusions, like one of the people from Ocracoke went to East Carolina, and she was on the fire committee, and of course people made fun of her because she was going to say far, 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 and nobody would know to run out of the building. Okay, so pronunciation, we can go to to this one here.
College.
There you go.
We had a tea go to for
Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, you can show her again so that
I,
she.
well, I show her again. See her now.
I wanted to iron the dress to get the crease out of it where it had been taped up, and I went to every suite in that dorm, asking if they had an iron I could borrow. Nobody had an iron. Nobody had an iron. Come to find out, everybody had one. They didn't know what I was asking for. They all had irons, but I needed an iron.
Okay, that's good. And then the next one is vocabulary. There are lots of vocabulary differences. I saw one on the shirt downstairs about mamic. Try that one there.
You're not hearing the working too hard, any kind of thing like that. It's mom to death.
for my whole life. You know, you get all the time. That's just about as bad as it can get. To be mama. It's just about as bad as it can get.
It means to shred or tear apart. To just, no other word for it except mom. You've been mom. You've been shrimping all night. You're tired, you're wet, you're hungry. You've just been shredded to pieces all night. You have been mom.
Yeah. Let's say it on the Pfizer. Words. Let's say it on the Pfizer.
Yeah, well, say the pies are, that's a porch that goes around the house like I get, they sit out on the pies.
Yeah, the real name's porch, we call it Pizer. Well, them older people, I think, more worse than others, but they call it Pizer.
They say how hot the weather is in Cam, and made it moderate. Then they say it's dead slick Cam. I mean, the more Arizona water like oil on it, say. Slick Cam, that's when there's no wind whatsoever. Like you go out there and look on that water and it's perfectly slick. There's no movement. A slick calming, there's nothing moving.
That mark right there.
Anything that maybe that you're building and it's supposed to be level and it's supposed to be true and it's supposed to be square and something didn't work out right, it's Walker Joint.
Walker joint, yeah, that's right. Building a boat that she didn't get right, she Walker joint.
Something's not true, you know, if it's out of shape, it'd be a whopper joint.
Drawing was a cuss word, y'all right, when we were growing up. Nobody else used it, but just the people here. And I don't think to this day anybody's ever known what it meant.
The drawing would be like, it's not real, or you're not telling the truth, or, you know, they stretch it, you're gonna drawing.
Okay, so that gives you an idea of some of the vocabulary that it's also shared with Arcus Island. We can go to the next one here.
Do you say dryme on Ocracoke?
Not very much.
We used to when I was growing up back in like the 80s and stuff, but in the early 90s, but we don't use it hardly at all anymore.
I was thinking it was Downey's specifically.
Yeah.
James Barry said it was a core sound word.
It was.
That's what's in video.
It was a Atlantic word a lot of you use a lot in Atlantic.
We always use drawing when I was growing up.
That's exactly.
What was the word?
But we can't say what it means. You can't really say, I'll be honest.
Something that's not real or fake or something like that.
No.
No, that's a good.
Well, but yeah, that's what most people use that. That's not.
That's a good example, though, sort of how dialect on Ocracoke and dialect on Arcus Island differs that people who live there would be aware of, but people elsewhere wouldn't at all. Yeah, just, you know, like other words.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Still look up. Talking in opposites is getting cut off, so that's what it says
There
up
we
there.
go.
Okay.
Can you reduce it and get it?
Well, it should be fine. Try this trick.
Hey, you take a pretty day, you know, you walk out the house, the sun's bright and shiny, you say, this is an ugly day, isn't it? What you mean, it's a pretty day, you know. She said, well, what's wrong with the day? I said, well, there's nothing wrong with it, it's a pretty day. She said, why don't you say that? If you come out the house and it's raining, he said, boy, this is a pretty time. She said, why don't you sit down and pretty about it? You know, it's raining. She said, why don't you say what you mean? It took my wife about 20 years to realize I was talking in opposites. I always been talking in opposites. After a while, she learned it.
They could say, that crowd had the greatest time. Well, that means that could have meant that it could have been anywhere from 2 people to 20 people. The term crowd is used very loosely. And that in the greatest time, it could be not necessarily positive. It could have been that maybe they were fussing about something and feuding and hollering and screaming and whatever. But greatest means like intensity, you know. And time could be just an occurrence. So that crowd had the greatest time. They could have been out there just fussing and fuming, or maybe out there fighting over some fish nets or something, you know. But I say people in their maybe mid-40s on up, you will hear a greater amount of these expressions, and especially the older folks.
Actually, what's interesting about talking in opposites is it's something that's very characteristic of Tangier Island and Smith Island. They use it a lot more than folks in Ocracoke and Harper's Island. But it is something that was shared historically, and it's sort of a sarcasm, you know, so if you say the opposite, people get to recognize it and so forth, unless they're from outside, they don't know. Okay, let me go on.
One time we were on Smith Island, Karen, with her. Anyway, we were talking at the community store, and somebody comes up and asks us if we sound like we were from Tangier, and that wasn't a compliment. Smith Island and Tangier being at odds for a century.
Yeah, well, that's another case where people sort of lump Smith Island and Tangier together, but they're not really lumpable. So, okay, we can go on to the next one. So we wrote this book with Candy, and it's what we call a beach book. That is, instead of sort of long chapters. So, for example, in the first book that we wrote in 1996, I had a 40-page chapter on grammar. Nobody read it because they don't want to read it. So these are all short chapters. So there are 24 5-page chapters, so you can sort of read it before you take your nap on the beach. That's the idea. And we also don't use technical stuff and actually confront the kind of questions that have often been asked of Ocracoke. So if we go to the next, we'll see a few of the chapters. So there you go. So for example, you know, at one point, people can be stupid, you know, dingbatters or dingdots or whatever you call them, all right? So then they asked them, do they take American money over there? So we thought that would be sort of a cute sort of image to talk about sort of people's perceptions of it. And then, of course, there are people, as a matter of fact, the reason I went to Ocracoke is because an English professor at NC State, when I came here, I knew nobody in the state. I just came and I decided I would do this. So my wife and I had no friend. So every weekend we would go to sort of a different region and just sort of check it out. And Ocracoke was on the list. And one of my English professors said, well, you should go to Ocracoke because that's where they speak Shakespearean English. Well, the fact of the matter is languages all change. And so nobody speaks Shakespearean English. Do they have some older English forms? Yeah, of course. But so do lots of other dialects in English. So, but it's changing, and one of the things, of course, is, you know, like, for example, so their term for outsider is dingbat, okay? Well, we have a pretty clear history because we have a vocabulary, and before 1972, it was like stranger or off or foreigner or something like that. But in 1972, they got television, all right? That's when it started coming. And you remember what show was on? All in the Family with Archie Bunker. And what did Archie Bunker call his wife? A dingbat, right? So they appropriated that term because he called her a dingbat because he didn't think she had any common sense. It's sort of a parody of a sexist husband and so forth. And they took that and simply appropriated it to people from off island who came. And that's how that's a modern, well, it was a modern term then, you know, and it's different from other terms. But that also shows sort of, and what of course is interesting is that often distinct dialect areas have particular terms for outsiders, whether it's off, whether it's dit dot, as it used to be. What's it in Harper's Island these days?
It's still dit dot and dingbatter. But I remember when it originated in the 60s and 70s.
Right.
So, you know, you're exactly right in saying that it's not a term that's been there forever.
Well, you know, I always like to be exactly right.
My grandmama would say they're from off.
So, yeah, that's another term. Yeah. So it's things like that, and then of course, there's this notion that it might be pirate talk because Blackbeard was there and so forth. Well, that was totally fallacious, you know. What is pirate talk anyhow? Arg, arg. You know, and they have this sort of distinct sound, and it has nothing to do with it, but people think about it. And then we talk about things like, you know, what is the Ocracoke accent like? Can dingbatters understand the brogue? And as you'll see, I'm going to play an example of this. There are some things that dingbatters can understand, and there are conversations they can't understand at all. So that's the way it goes, and we'll celebrate that. And how is it changing? Of course, changing. And then there's a really interesting movement in Ocracoke now. Today, over 50% of the kids in the school are Latino. Because they came here when there weren't service workers. They were very good service workers, and said they were the first language, not English, to be introduced there, other than the sort of Native Americans who didn't. It's hypothesized they didn't live there, but they did travel to there and so forth. So it's really sort of interesting as the community. We've studied a lot of emerging Spanish in North Carolina, and they have I would say they have the most congenial relationship of any community that we studied because they provide service. They're good. Well, yeah.
Sorry, I did have a question. Is that the first like non-white group you've observed speaking this dialect?
Well, actually, they don't use the dialect at all. They use sort of a standardized version of English that's accented in Hispanicized. So, but actually, I'm going to talk about the African Americans on Ocracoke in a little while, if you can wait for that. Okay. So then it's sort of what will happen to the brogue? You know, it will obviously sort of cease to be as it is, but there are some younger speakers who really want to be identified as Ocockers, and they want that to be reflected in their language. It's not like it was when James Barry and those guys were young, but it's also not like other Ocockers and distinct in that sense. So this is these are sort of the things that we talk in very non-technical terms. Okay, so we have images from historical maps, we have maps of influence, we have archival photos of community members, places, more than 80 QR codes, stories or view video, and then there's an accompanying website and so forth. So if we go to the next one, so for example, this is a from the 17, 1800s, you know, where it's called Ocracoke, all right, which is where we think it comes from a Native American group, which was Ocracoke, and then later, if you go to the next one, okay, it's now called Ocracoke, all right, Island, and changes and original and eventually sort of settles on the spelling of Ocracoke, like an okra and a coke. So this just sort of gives some of the historical narrative of where the term comes from. We'll go to that. We also have maps in terms of the influence. So there's, interestingly enough, there's Scots-Irish influence from Philadelphia, and actually 50, 75 years ago, there were lots of people who worked in the Philadelphia on the docks. Yep.
Engineers.
Yeah, and so we get from Jamestown to Philadelphia, and these are the places in Europe where they came from. Okay, we can move to on. This is what one of the earliest ferries looked like. It wasn't like they look today, you know, and they only had a couple of cars. And so sort of until, of course, when we got there, lots of things were paved, but it's surprising how much more paved it is today. There were no names to streets, but you know, when GSA comes in and FedEx wants to get to a place they need, so they went through a whole process where they named and gave addresses to all the places, which was that controversial?
The only thing controversial about it was some of the names that they used. They weren't local names that I knew and the other ones knew growing up, like Sunset Village Road, they call, which we always called Firehouse Road because it was straight across from the firehouse. So that was the only controversial thing about it was they mainly named the names because we got a 911 system. So we got a little bit gentrified. And so that was one of the reasons that they chose to name the names. And the only controversial, like I said, was because they had used some names that, they called it Sunset Village. Where they got that from, I have no clue. It was always Firehouse Road. And Douglas can probably tell you the same thing in Ammunition that road. Because, so it was always, they used ones that we had never heard of. So, but I wouldn't say it was really that controversial other than that. So.
Okay, we'll go to the next one here.
That ferry right there, I rode onto.
You did?
Yeah, on Fraser Field.
Yeah.
She got 4 cars. And wherever she run around, he put you overboard.
There you go.
And that truck that you seen on there, that was the mail truck.
That was probably Charlie Mack.
Charlie Mack.
Yeah.
Charlie Mack run her. Had the red cross still on the side of her. That truck right there.
Which is pulling what?
Now you have
Coming off the ferry.
He's coming on that ferry. That ferry carried 4
It's so
cars.
shallow that the ferry can't come in. So Charlie Mack, who is the truck, who lived on Ocracoke, who did the mail, he would drive out and pick up the mail, and anybody else passengers who wanted to go, and they would go. He would drive them back to the island because the ferry boat couldn't get in any farther because it was just too shallow.
Right.
He drove through.
Okay, we'll go to the next one here. Okay, so there are lots of different traditions. Ocracoke has a sort of robust music tradition, and as we see now with Rex O'Neill's grandson Dallas, who's become quite famous, and sort of people sort of had talked because at age 7 or 8, he was a drummer in a grown-up and band, and he's incredibly gifted musically and so forth. So there's that tradition that we want to capture. Okay, we can go on to the next one there, and then one of the things we're trying to do. So here's Dallas here, with the adult band, and this is one of the Latins who Eduardo, who set up a very popular and very good. I mean, my students sort of crave going to his. I think he's going to move back to Mexico.
Yeah, this is his last year.
This is his last year, but he has the best. So we want to capture these sorts of things. We go to the next one here.
What is he doing?
Oh,
Oh,
he cooks tacos, and there are a couple of places where you can get it, and also some of the mainstays restaurants have adapted and now include Mexican food. Okay, we'll go next one there. Okay, and then it's sort of interesting, and one of the things that we've seen is we've looked. This is the current demography. Nobody knows exactly how many ancestral islanders. So that is people who can go back, at least more than 4 generations. And everybody else is sort of a dingbatter. It's got a population of about 900 and some year round. Is that right? About right? Yeah. And then Chester, one of our sources there, says there are 330 people who are ancestral islanders. I don't know.
There might have been when you started, but they ain't now.
Well, that's true. It's changing, which is one of the reasons that we want to celebrate this Ocracoke Broge. Let's go to the next one. Okay.
I keep hitting the wrong one. Sorry.
What's that?
I keep hitting the wrong button.
That's
Anyway.
all right. That's all right.
We'll survive it.
So we do a lot of technical analysis that's interesting, okay? And I'm just going to introduce you to one thing, and that's the use of gender. So what we did was we tabulated all the cases when women and men of different age groups said hoy-toy, the hoy-toy vowel. So that's sort of the iconic vowel and so we charted them, and what we found was that older women, you can check the next one, and you should get a circle there. Yeah, don't show a difference. So the men and women are similar. And in some ways, the women are a little stronger. Then with the middle age, we found a group there that we labeled the poker game group, which was a group of all men Some of them were highly educated, others weren't, but they would get together and actually play poker. But there was also sort of a motif about them. There were true islanders who were never going to leave the islander again, like James Barry was part of that group, and a couple of other people, Dave Esham and so forth. And so we compared the poker group, other middle-aged men and middle-aged women, and found that the poker group actually had the most use of oi. And that was because that was the iconic vowel that represents Ocracoke. And they wanted to be represented. But what you see then is as time goes on, and you can push the button and get the circle for that. So you see middle-aged men are actually below women, and the poker game is as high as the previous generation. And then with younger males and females, younger males are much more apt to use it than younger females, even though they don't use it that much. Okay, there's another circle there. There you go. Okay, now let me explain that. Here's our explanation. All right, go to the next slide. Okay, so what happened was pre-war there were no gender differences. Okay, 50s and 60s, women started losing the brogue because they were the ones who worked in the hotels and interacted with the tourists the most. And in a sense, their brogue didn't have much sort of cultural significance. But for some of the men, so for example, Rex O'Neill is now known, throughout sort of the linguist world as this guy who can change his dialects and so forth and use the brogue. And it's so what happens is that what used to have no gender significance has taken on gender significance. So now it's associated with sort of like rugged islanders who are men, right? As opposed to now nobody's thinking about this except us, of course. And we come up with the reasons for this, but it seems very interesting to explain how women have stopped using it. And the only thing I can say to support it, once I was at the ferry, I was talking to a native while we were waiting, and I noted to her, I said, well, why do you think the men continue the brogue longer than women? And her comment was, because it ain't ladylike. All right, so what she was indicating that it had taken on this gender significance and was associated with rugged maleness. Okay, so that's what academics do for a living. Okay, now I want to play you these examples because people in Ocracoke can be very facile with their use of dialect. So we interviewed Rex O'Neill, and I had a cool field worker who interviewed him, and this is what he sounded like. We'll see how that works. Okay, we'll go.
Go back to the.
We have to,
Got it down pat
Go
now.
back to this now.
When I came back, first 4 years after I came back, I opened myself up a retail seafood business in the summer. I sold fish, cleaned and sold fish to restaurants. Right. And also sold fish to retail. Me and 3 other guys together opened up a retail business. And we sold fish to retail.
one of the things you'll notice there is that he says fish is fish, and he kind of uses time. He doesn't say toy, all right? And also sort of like he says myself. He doesn't say myself and so forth. So play the next one. So while my field worker is talking to him, okay, go to the next slide. Okay, his brothers come along, and he has a conversation with them. Listen to this.
Yeah.
It's a little low, but
Yeah, I tell you, I believe when you don't throw that grass in, you let that whole kind of thing. I left them I do. I said, well, that's good. And sometimes I put it on the fat pot. It's too late. Shooting it next? Huh? Shooting it next? I did because it's hard to do. I get through a hole. I mean, it might be because that's possible. I tell you what, when a man is going to stick his head up in there looking down, I still going to do it's disturbing. Might be. It stayed in there.
You can go to the next slide.
Which I started, I should have studied together. It's my fault for not studying together.
Yeah, but I mean, if you like that, you know,
That's what that grass laying up there.
Okay, we go to the, we already did that, so go 2 slides here. Okay, that's good, we already listened to that. Now go to the next one where he's talking to the kids in the.
This one here?
The one below it, yeah, go to the next one. Yeah, okay, so at one point when we were there, the first week, somebody said to him, you know, he was performing the brogue, and they said, well, you talked to Walt Wolfram already, didn't you? And here's what he said about that. Just press the. We'll get through this. There you go. Press it again. Okay.
All right,
He says something.
try something else. Oh,
I'm studying. Oh, try it now.
do this, I did get back.
So when y'all were studying this, did you go up into Dare County also, or did you just stay down and hide at Ocracoke?
We actually did a bunch of.
Sorry.
I'm studying speech. I said, well, wait till we go to Sam Sorry. Last night on waterfall, night moonshine, no fish. No fish. What's the matter of boys?
So what he's doing there is performing the speech for outsiders. So people come there and they say, oh, we want to hear this quaint speech. And everybody says, go talk to Rex O'Neill. So they come up and Rex O'Neill performs to them. Sort of like, but it also shows, now, he actually had this talent before we got to them. But we actually studied it and wrote academic articles about how he can shift his dialect depending on who he's talking to. We actually did go up there. We did a whole study in Manteo, and we have some tape from Wanchese as well. So,
bilingual.
huh? Yeah, really. Okay, I wanted you to hear that though, because he's very versatile in his use of dialect. You didn't hear any of those forms when he was talking about Gilbert. But when he was talking to his brothers, that's the kind of speech that's difficult for outsiders to understand because they were talking so fast and they were interrupting and so forth. So we go to the next one. Okay, so one of the things we did here is after we interviewed people, because we interviewed a lot of old people, some of them passed on, and so what we did was a collection of celebrations of those people. So one of them was Roy Parsons, who, I don't know when Roy passed away, do you, Candy? 1990s?
Yeah, late 90s, early
Yeah.
2000s.
So we went back to his tape and just sort of made a little celebration of his speech. So if you play that, you can see a little of it. He was a singer who spent time in New York. Go low.
This,
There you go.
I can find it.
There you go.
Guitar is my sweetheart, it's the only one for me. Put her in the corner, and I know she'll wait for me if I am late. I know she'll wait. Oh, the guitar is my sweetheart, she's the only one for me.
So if we can go to 3 on this, to 3 minutes, move it as a 3 minutes. I want to hear a yodeling song.
She won't say no. Oh, the
Just move
guitar.
it up to 3. There you go. There you go. Good.
And Roy wrote his own music.
I got in Grand Central Station and I asked people in there, they asked me, they said, where'd you come from? I said, North Carolina. He says, that's North Carolina, ain't he? I said, North Carolina. And he said, well, you're a Carolinaman then. I said, yeah. And I was asking about places to rent, this and that. I couldn't get no sense out of him. And he lived there. But he could find his home.
But that's just sort of a nice memory of a guy who was a professional singer. I guess he was professional at some point.
Yeah, he was on vaudeville.
Yeah, okay. So that's a nice, now, okay, so somebody asked before, sort of, go to the next one, and then the next one, the next one. Okay. Skip, Jules. The next one. Okay. So actually, they had enslaved people on Ocracoke before the Civil War. The number is sort of about 100, something like that. Something like that. All of them left after the Civil War. But there was one African American family that moved from near Little Washington, all right? And they came by steamboat, and that family lived on Ocracoke until the last member of the family died. They came in 1865, and they lived there until 2008. That's when Guzman died right there. So she was 103 years old at the time she died. When we got there, she was in her 90s. And as a linguist, I'm really interested. So did an African American pick up this dialect? Because the family lived there for 150 years or so, you know, or well over 100 years. And so we did interviews with her. We wrote up articles and so forth. And when she turned 100, they had a birthday party for her in the gymnasium. And so they had a celebration, and they asked us, because they didn't have anybody who sort of did camera work, and so if we would come and film it. So we filmed it, and if you go to the next one, you'll see the film there, I think. Or maybe it's this one. Yeah, this is it. Yeah. We'll see how we have to watch it. Yeah, that's fine.
What is your name?
Muzel, M-U-Z-E-L.
What were your parents' names?
My mother's name Jane. She got married, so I married the name of Jane Bryant.
And your father's name?
He was Leonard.
What did your father do when he was here?
Well, he was only two little common working and two little farming, a little bit farming here.
Okay. And do you like music?
Yes, I do.
What kind of music do you like?
I don't see the kind of a fan.
I used to sit on Grandpa's porch and watch the world go by. I'd wonder when my grandpa saved my
We were there. Weren't you with us?
It seems like only yesterday that big eye run the store. And we were cleaning up the mess from the storm of 44.
I was younger then.
Love to hear the stories of how it used to be. The tales of ships and sailors that
This song
sailed
was
on the
written
sea.
by a local
Run
musician,
barefoot down the
Gary,
ocean
who's very
road,
famous.
swimming in the creek. Playing tag on Mails Hill, gigging founders on
That
the
was
reef.
her daughter. She didn't have any children.
He would sit and tell me stories of how it was back then.
No, it was her.
Fish and fowl plenty, and your neighbor was a friend. Now those times have gone away, they passed us by somehow. I said, oh, if I could just go back and know what I know now.
We call her Musa and Musel and Musi and Muse. And today we gather to celebrate her 100 years. My family and I have always considered you and your family a special part of us. I learned from your sister, Mildred, years ago, some of your family history. how your grandparents, Harkis and Winnie Blunt, came to Ocracoke from Blunt's Creek after the slaves were freed. Harkis was an excellent carpenter and boat builder, and they later had 2 daughters, Anna Laura and Jane, your mother. Jane worked at the old Doxy clam factory with Winnie and met and married Leonard Bryant of Englehart. Some of Leonard's family are here today, Leon. As you begin the 2nd century of your life, we just wanted you to know how special you are and what your life has meant to all of us, and that we love you.
And this was her favorite song.
Sunshine, only sunshine. You make me happy when skies are gray. You'll never know, dear, how much I love you. So please don't take my sunshine away. Please don't take my sunshine away.
So when she was supposed to be at their celebration for her 104th birthday, but she passed away a couple weeks before. But for 2 years after that, she had one room in the Ocracoke Preservation Society that was dedicated to her. You know, they had a crib with little black babies in the crib and some of her mementos and so forth. And my feeling is that people like this are really worth celebrating. I mean, I was told, and you can confirm or not confirm this, that this was one of the largest gatherings they ever had in the gymnasium.
Probably was.
But she couldn't go to that school because of segregation. And so they didn't have a separate school. Volunteers taught her after school, as well as her brothers and sisters. And so actually, we were sort of figuring out, she doesn't sound like Ocracoke. She sounds more black. Like, how would a family maintain a black dialect for 150 years in Ocracoke? But actually, all the kids were around. They had their own little dialect. There were 9 kids, right? They didn't go to school when the other kids were at school, and they would get tutored afterward. So this is sort of intriguing stuff to us. And I think we'll stop with one more, and then you can ask questions to Candy, because she's the one who really knows these things. Okay, so just keep on the next one. Yeah, these are the kind of things that we've done with this. This is our group. Actually, this is interesting. This young woman, actually, we taught in 8th grade. She then became a student in education at NC State, where I knew her. And when she was in school, she came and did our spring teaching. And now she's a regular teacher in the Ocracoke school. Yeah. So it's from 8th grade back to the school. And we'll just a little toast here, and then I'll let Candy answer questions. No, the next one should have a video.
It says in the slideshow. Okay.
Go up one
right
more.
here?
No, the next one. There you go. Down here. Yeah.
All right.
Try that. Go small. There you go.
So I just learned a new word. You know what a gospel bird is, students? It's fried chicken every Sunday. For all of the students, for all these wonderful people who tolerated my ignorance, the best friends I have. Thanks, guys. Don't forget to order gospel bird.
Okay, so we'll stop there, and you can ask you can ask Candy questions. You can ask me a question, but she knows a lot more than I do about the island. So
Not the technical stuff, you know all that.
I have a question.
There you go.
We were out at Ocracoke last week, the day before the Fig Festival. And driving around, I saw a lot of private residences with fig plants. In order to get all the figs needed for the fig festival, where do they come from? There aren't any fig farms out there. Right?
They're from the trees on the island.
They are?
Pretty much
That
everybody
must have
that,
been last year's crop.
no,
The new ones are, they didn't look like
pretty
they
much
were.
everybody that lives on the island, well, I won't say pretty much, but a lot of the old homes that people live in on the island and stuff have fig trees. Like my cousin, he's got like 8 in his yard, and then there's another guy that I know that lives on Howard Street. He's got about 10 or 12 in his backyard. So just, I would say, like I said, the older homes have got like 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 fig trees. Now, when I was growing up, we never ate the fresh figs. Always were picked and preserved to save later to either have the preserves for like on your biscuits for breakfast or like for a dessert, or made into like a fig cake, which is kind of like an applesauce cake, but it's made with fig preserves instead of the applesauce. So, but no, there are quite a few fig trees on the island, and they're very prolific, as you can see from the figs that they had.
Question over here.
I have to leave in 5 minutes, but I wanted to tell you guys this. I live in Marshallburg, and the division chief of immunology at Duke was from Cornwall, England, and I worked for him for 6 years. His name was Bernard Amos, and I brought him down to Marshallburg frequently to go charter fishing, and he'd bring some friends. But he got to know some of the local people, and he looked at me one day and he said, "My Lord, Gail, I feel like I'm to home."
You know, that's sort of the area where people locate in England where it comes from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'll throw one more little thing out. When I was a little girl, I was born and raised in Durham. That's why I don't have any brogue. But I would come down here and I learned each village's down east brogue. And I loved it. And my daddy looked at me one day and he said, "Gail, don't make fun of the way these people talk. They can't help how they talk." And he was raised there. I said, "Make fun? I want to be one." And I've lived here for 40 years now in my granddaddy's house.
Oh, bless your heart.
Yes.
Here's a question.
Is it really? I guess speaking of, like the little areas down east, are there any major differences between the way people in Ocracoke speak and the people in, say, Harper's Island or down east area? Like, what are some of those differences that you observe?
Yeah. Well,
But like, in what way?
actually, one of the things that's quite different in the Harper's Island and Ocracoke is that actually when they give up the brogue, Oakcockers don't sound as southern as Harper's Island. All right, so when they give up the hoy toy vowel, somebody from down east might pick up the general southern tad, right, where you don't glide it. Oakcockers don't do that, because one night I sent my students. I said, "Okay, your assignment tonight is to go to every hotel and to count the license plates and where they're from, and they're all from the north." Right? They're from places like New Jersey, Ohio, Pennsylvania, you know. But if you look at the people who go to Harper's Island, they're mainly from North Carolina. So the North Carolinians, they go to fish, so they're a different sort of clientele. But the way that develops, and if you look at most of the people who move in from outside to Ocracoke are not from places like South Carolina, Alabama, and Georgia. They're from northern places, and so there's a different effect in terms of its association. As the other thing is that because Harper's Island has less inundation of outsiders, when I was studying them, the brogue of their younger speakers was stronger than the younger speakers of Ocracoke.
That changed stuff.
That changed, so. Yeah.
And what you were saying about North Carolina's changed too, even like for all of Carter County, the people that are coming here now are not just from North Carolina. Like if you work at the art gallery or whatever, and you ask the people where they're from, they're generally from places. And so it has changed.
Really off.
They're lost. I don't know how they found it, but they're here.
My father was in the Navy during World War II. He was on Ocracoke. Do you know anything about that?
What's the question?
My father was in the Navy in World War II, and he was stationed on Ocracoke.
Well, Douglas might can help me with some of this. Yes, I do. There
I mean, they had some stories, but they're both dead
right.
now.
There was a Navy base on the island, and it was quote unquote not supposed to be known that there was a Navy base on the island during World War II. But we did have a Navy base, and there was a lot of guys that came down from north, from Pennsylvania in that area, that came down to were in the Coast Guard and in the Navy. Supposedly there was about 500 that was here and on the island that was in the Navy. So they had a hospital, they had barracks, they had their own canteen, and they had a couple of the houses and stuff. And I don't know if any of y'all have ever been to Ocracoke or not, but if you come in on the Cedar Island or Stormwater Ferry, that southern area where you come in, that's where the Navy base was.
He was from Kentucky, but my mother was with him. There was another couple that they stayed friends with forever. So the officers had little houses,
the officers had their own private homes, and they had like a little officers club and everything there. So,
but he said there was no paved roads or anything.
No, not back then. There weren't. It was all either dirt or they had the Marston mats, like the airplanes and stuff would land on. That was what the roads were mostly back then.
And then the Navy
transferred.
The Navy paved a concrete road, just the width of a car.
Okay.
They paved some up to ammunition dump and all that.
Yeah.
Where they had
It was
the
next to
bunkers.
the Cape for the Coast Guard station.
Right, that's all they had. And then later on, the state come in and paved over top of it. If you look at the road, a lot of the roads you can look at them and see the original concrete part, and you see the part that's asphalt all through the sides where they done, especially down by the lighthouse and all that, because that's where I was raised at down there.
Now, then he was transferred to the Pacific. So did the base close?
Yeah, they
closed right after World War II.
Yeah, and they tore it down. Like where she said, when you come into the ferry, if you look right straight when you come into the dock from the ferry, Coast Guard station's on the left, and all of the rest of that, all the way around to the Preservation Society and all that, was a Navy base. That's why people say, let's go down base. That's why they call it base. I mean, they had, like I say, they had the whole works, the buildings, the whole mess, everything was there. It was a big outfit.
He was only there about a year, so I guess they needed him to go to the Pacific. But I didn't know if they closed it after a year or something.
No, they closed it after the war, and they actually dredged, like Silver Lake, they dredged that too, because to keep the submarine, well, for the boats and stuff to come in. And then where I live, kind of over by the lighthouse, and my grandparents always told me when I was growing up and stuff that they had that side of the house out towards the ocean to keep the, submarines and stuff so they didn't see their lights, and they put like a big net and stuff at the mouth of the creek there to keep the submarines and stuff from coming in. So in case y'all weren't here in the beginning, Douglas, sitting back there on the back, he is a true Ocracoker. He was born and raised there, so he knows a lot about the history. More than I do, the older stuff.
She knew more about the younger stuff because I left moved down here.
So he was on a transplant.
He's a transplanted Ocracoke. We have a question.
About the Navy, when I was in graduate school in the 70s up in Virginia, there was a gentleman who ran one of our research vessels, Jack Lewis. He was from Norfolk, but he told the story that during World War II, he was stationed on Ocracoke with a detail of Seabees, and he helped build some of the infrastructure you're talking about, but he built observation posts, but he had a detail of excavators and bulldozers. His finish to the story was, he said that he'd always say, if you're looking for Blackbeard's treasure, don't look on Ocracoke. He said, I turned that island over 3 times.
And he's probably very true, because it's been turned over quite a lot and nobody's found it yet, so.
One other observation about James Barry's son, I guess, that went to state and took the marine science class and was a little dismayed. I had a friend that taught marine science down at UNC Wilmington, and there was this young man from Harker's Island in his class, and the professor put up a pink shrimp, a brown shrimp, and a white shrimp, and gave the scientific names and both from Harvard Science. I said, no. He said, that's all wrong. He said, the one up top, that's a spotted shrimp. And then the one in the middle, that's your summer shrimp. And then that one at the bottom, that's a green tail.
One more question. It's 3:15. One more question. Anybody?
I have a question about the castle.
Ask Candy. Castle.
Was it owned by Sam Jones?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you tell me anything? Because I just remember as a child, I knew someone who went there, a friend's father, and everybody was told, I was told, that all the women had to wear the same dress that he had ordered from Sears and Roebuck, and the men had to drink his liquor. You couldn't, but that's all I remember. And I've always been fascinated because there was nobody to ask about it.
I barely remember him because he passed away in the late 70s.
I can tell you a little bit about him.
Yeah,
he was a character.
When Sam Jones come, Sam Jones done more for Ocracoke than anybody's ever been there.
Where did he come from?
Berkeley Machine Works, Berkeley Machine Works and made train parts in Norfolk, Virginia.
Actually, he was
I stayed
born
his
in
house.
Swan Quarter is where he grew up.
Yeah.
And then he owned Berkeley Machine Works in Virginia Beach, and actually it was Norfolk.
Norfolk, yeah.
And then he came down to Ocracoke, and he built the castle. He also built the Berkeley Manor, and then he also built like what we call the home place. The Berkeley's like when you come into the harbor, and then the castle is on the harbor, and then over on this side of the harbor, because the island, in my opinion, is kind of like a big wrench. It's like the wrench is the handle of the wrench is like the beach area, and then the mouth of the wrench is kind of like the village, and with the creek in the middle. So he had the one place when you came in at this bottom of the wrench at the ferry, and then he had the other one that was on the other side of the harbor, and then they had a home place that was on like almost the other end, opposite end of the harbor where the ferry comes in. So he had those three places built, and he built the castle first, and down at the manor, which was called Berkeley Manor, they used to have horse roundups like the 4th of July and stuff. They had all kinds of parties and stuff. And my mom used to work for him, and they worked at the castle. And yes, they all had the same dresses. And Roy Parson, who you've seen on here, he worked for him, and different guys on the island, or the older gentlemen, worked for him doing carpentry work and everything. And they always said that every day they come in, they didn't know what they were going to do because Sam was always changing something. If they put a dormer here, he decided he didn't want the dormer there. He, have them prefix that and put another dormer somewhere. I mean, he was always changing everything. He was very eccentric, and he liked to be in control of things, my understanding.
Yeah.
And he, yes, that's why he had them all dressed the same. And he used to have a horse like he did. He'd bring the horse into the manor, and they, play music and different things like that and everything. So, yes, he was quite a character.
He would come one day, most of the time he'd come on weekends. And when he come with a solid truckload of wristwatches. Everybody he'd seen, he'd give a wristwatch. Next week he'd come with a load of pocketbooks. Every woman he'd seen, he'd give a pocketbook or a man of billfold. Next week he may come with a load of boot feet. He'd give everybody he'd seen there. Like I said, Sam Jones done more for Ocracoke than anybody's ever been there.
Yeah, he did.
He built the school.
Yeah.
Pike County didn't have money enough to build another school, and the old school was falling down, the one I went to. But they wanted a new school. Sam Jones said, I'll build it, but it's going to be built the way I want it to. And they had to build it like him. He built the first fire station on Ocracoke,
yeah.
To him. And Jones done a lot for people at Ocracoke. And Hardy, God only knows how many people that worked for him. Sam
Was
done
he
a
a
lot
big partier?
Yeah, he threw his parties, but it was big shots that he had mostly. I don't know how familiar you all are with people around here, but Hubert Bonner, Lindsay Warren.
Oh, yeah.
People.
I grew up in Washington,
Okay.
so I knew her.
Yeah, Uncle Hubby. That's what we call him, Uncle Hubby.
Okay.
Yeah, he was there, and like I say, he was a congressman from California. The reason I know that because I met his daughter. But anyway, he was there. I mean, when he had his parties, he had big parties.
Out his three homes? His three homes?
Yeah.
You're talking about?
Yeah.
3 houses that he lived in?
Yeah, well, one, the homestead was where he kind of lived, and then the manor and the castle was where he entertained his guests that came, the ones that he invited down and that flew in or whatever. He would have like his workers and stuff up at Berkeley Machine Works would come. He'd bring them down, for 2 or 3 days.
Yeah.
have a party and this, that, and the other, dance and, drink and that kind of stuff. So yes, he did have the
The
three.
one on the left, you first go into Silver Lake, the one on the left, not the one in the middle and the one on the right. The one right on the left, he took his horse and cut him slam through the top of that building.
Yes.
Walked that horse up all them steps and cut him slam up. He's buried down Springer's beside his horse. I mean, his horse
And
was
the horse
buried
is standing up.
Yeah, the horse was standing up supposedly.
there above down there.
Well, Springer's Point, he used to own that.
Which is where Blackbeard was owned it all from originally. The Blackbeard property.
He was.
So thank y'all for coming. By the way, there are books downstairs. If you
We're
want
also,
to sign.
we're also free buttons here. Every year for the last 15, we have a booth at the fair, state fair, and we celebrate dialects. There's one on the Outer Banks. And we have different buttons commemorating different dialects. So, for example, Dingbatter is a button. Ollie Doll is a button. So feel free to take a button.
Thank you. Thank you.
Enjoy this. New York City. Lived here in North Carolina a long time ago. 48 years.
New speech. Yeah. Okay, it's lovely. You're gonna get whipped. Yeah. I can't remember the
You can only drink.
I've ever seen it's great. There's a small one, like 4.
And I remember that when that's the only store bridge.
They just don't. I can't do that.
I wonder how deep this is. That part in it's down. They've been down for a year. Get her. Good Lord. The guy he was talking to, like I live in Willow, I know the guy who built the top.